This is a video that I'm doing as an addendum to my Ask Dan Schneider number 100 video, and it concerns the deaths of Oscar Schneider, the cat mentioned in ADS 100, and also Kiwi Schneider, my oldest female. Oscar was the oldest cat, and he's the oldest cat. Uh, he he died 3 minutes before Kiwi, as I'll explain in the video, but he was 6 to 8 weeks older. So Oscar is currently the record holder for age in Schneider cats. So we still have Thor, who's 12, and Zeus, who's 7, and we'll probably get some kittens in a month or two. But that's the way things are going. And this video will give some information that I just feel I need to tell the world and to have a record of things while it's fresh in my mind. I didn't have the technology to do so the last time. Cats of ours died in 2012, Apollo and Shadow, nor earlier, obviously. Well, I've written about them and written books and stuff about them, as I'll explain in the video. So this is December 13th, a Friday of 2019, and Oscar and Kiwi died on December 10th, on Tuesday, 2019, and Oscar died at 11:47 a.m. and Kiwi at 11:50 a.m. Now on to the video. Well, this addendum to my Ask Dan Schneider number 100 is on the deaths of both Oscar, my cat, and Kiwi, my cat. I think I might have mentioned in the first ADS that Kiwi was actually sicker than Oscar for most of the last year, and that she had gotten a little bit better. But Oscar, they both died and were euthanized on December 10th, 2019, 3 days ago. It'll be 3 days in about a little over, almost a little under 7 hours. It'll be 3 full days. At 11:47 a.m., Oscar was euthanized. At 11:50, Kiwi was euthanized. That was on 12/10/19, a Tuesday. Today's Friday, the 13th, as I'm recording it. Oscar had been in the hospital, as I mentioned in that earlier video, since last Friday around 3:30 p.m. So it's almost a week ago, in about 8 hours or whatever it is, 10 hours. And I brought him in, and he spent the last 4 days of his life there. Kiwi just went in with Jessica and I at the last moment. Jessica and I had been arguing over things. I had this vision that Kiwi and Oscar were going to die together, or should die together. They were the original kittens, gotten within a week of each other. Anyway, Oscar's, he had been going downhill. His temperature had gone down to about 90 degrees on Tuesday morning. When I brought him in on 3:30, he couldn't walk much. The next day seemed okay. Jessica and I went to visit him. He seemed a little bit himself. That Sunday, 2 days being in there, he had his final really lucid moments that he knew I was there. On Monday, he seemed out of it. His eyes were glazed. He was going. Kiwi, meanwhile, was a little bit better. She could walk, but she'd have to stop after a few feet, and then she was diabetic. She was not shitting. She was barely eating. She wanted just water. And I knew she was going to go. Jessica was going to go off with her parents this weekend, and now is going to go. But I was saying, if these cats need to be put down, I'm putting them down. I'm not waiting for you. I can't justify, having them in such a situation. Oscar weighed 6 pounds at the end. Kiwi 5 pounds. Oscar was brought in. When we brought Kiwi in, we told the doctor, she's got to go too. If Oscar was 99% of the way near death and would probably have died later that day naturally, Kiwi might have lasted a day or two longer. She was 96, 97% of the way gone. Oscar was on this green towel with his head on a heated sock on the side. He was laying on his left side. Kiwi eventually laid on her left side too. They both needed catheters put in. We signed the forms. Kiwi was put on the table, and then she did this remarkable thing with her last strength. She crawled about half a foot, 6 to 8 inches over to where Oscar was, and laid on the towel with him on her left side, so that Oscar was sort of like they were sort of spooning, I guess, in a spooning position with Oscar on the left, Kiwi on the right, if you look down with them. Uh, and it's as if Kiwi said, no, I want to be with him. Even though they were sibling-like brothers and sisters, and they would sometimes fight, they grew up together. Kiwi was never as close to Oscar as she was to Shadow, but it's like she wanted to be, she saw he was suffering. Now, yes, there was the heated pad, and I'm not trying to totally imbue, but that she crawled over to him and lay within his bounds, with Oscar having the second eyelid showing. He couldn't control his eyelids. He was sort of dazed and out of it. And Kiwi went over as if to say, no, I want to give him some comfort in her last moments. Kiwi, who has got to be the embodiment of what an angel is, this little 5-pound dying cat went to go be with and protect her older brother, adopted older brother cat. It was such a beautiful, tender moment. Even the attending vet there, it wasn't Dr. Yu, it was Dr. Heelan. She said that just moved her so much. She crawled over to Oscar, but she was like this guardian angel of mercy for her bigger brother. I want to be with him. And Kiwi's hair had gotten very straw-like. Her ears were losing fur. This had happened a year and a half or so ago. She got on the medicine. Her fur grew back there. Oscar, though, his fur was still soft and white, but again, he was almost out of it. And I kissed him, and I said, I'm here, and Jessica did too. He was out of it. I don't know if he recognized us. I think he recognized the voice. He had a final moment of lucidity when he had to be brought for another catheter to put in, because the other one, he was bandaged too tightly, and he went, "Rah!" And that was it. That was his final moment of, I think, real total lucidity. Him grumbling there, and Kiwi's going over to Oscar was almost presaged by the fact that she didn't shun Oscar. When an animal is dying, a lot of times other animals shun them. They can smell death. But it's as if Kiwi knew he's got the same smell I did. So she went over to him because of the heated pad, over to him because it was her brother. She felt protective. But I think also she recognized, I'm just like him, just a little bit better. We're going to get these paw prints made in clay. Jessica wanted them. It's free from the service that disposes of the bodies. Kiwi was not eating. She was puking up, and so she was going. And as I said, I had a vision of them dying together 2 to 3 days before. Jessica thought I wanted to get rid of them and what. I'm like, no, but they need it. I knew. I told Jessica saying my intuition doesn't work as well as hers, which in most things it does. She's right. But when it comes to death, I know it. I'm intimate with death in a sense, and I'll know it when it's my time, hopefully 40 or 50 more years from now, because I've got so much to do in this life. But I knew that they were going to die together, both on their left sides. And I'm reading these notes here that I made. So anyway, another thing is neither of them had the snaggletooth grin of death. Of all the cats I've had, Freddie, he was put, when he was euthanized as an old cat, I wasn't there for him. I was working that day at Finest. My mom and I think maybe my sister brought him in to be euthanized. They were with him. Kitty, when she was euthanized, had that snaggletooth little grin where the tongue pokes out between the teeth. Sassy had that when she died. Shadow had that when he died and was euthanized. I'm told, my mom, I think, did tell me that Freddie had that. My mom died back a decade ago in '09. But neither Kiwi nor Freddie nor Oscar had it. Oscar may have just been too out of it to even do that. And Kiwi, Oscar, went first at 11:47 was when he finally went off and he stopped breathing. And then Kiwi 3 minutes later, and they laid there, and Jessica and I were with them for about 2 or 3 minutes, just loving them and telling them that they loved them. And God damn, there has to be a kitty heaven. If any creatures deserve it, it's cats and dogs and pets and animals in general. The poor animals that do die, in the red and tooth and claw evolutionary world that we live in. But And Kiwi also wasn't able to clean herself. She had dirty feet, food on her chest. She wasn't, Oscar, for all of his, for all of how his weakness at the end, he was remarkably clean. But he did have yellowish ears. Um, he had a low temperature at 90 degrees. They raised it up a bit, and then it was going down again. And as I said, he was in the hospital from December 6th to 10th, and Kiwi just on her last day. So that's it about the moment, Kiwi's angel moment. Oscar was the king of cats, and Kiwi was the guardian angel of mercy. What Oscar was the most human cat that I've ever known. In Star Trek II, Kirk says to Spock, he was the most human person or being that I ever knew, and and Oscar was the most human cat I ever knew. He had neuroses, and he had the way he looked his eyes, even more so than Bub, who had had only one eye. But Bub was expressive. Oscar was the most expressive. Chia had a little bit of that, but he was the most expressive. But Kiwi, what a sweet and wonderful girl she was. Oh, we did find out that yesterday when we stopped in to pay off the bill or on Wednesday when we stopped off to pay off the bill, that one of the techs there has a friend who has a litter of kittens who are 3 weeks old. So in a month, 4 or 5 weeks, mid to end January, we're going to get first dibs, we hope, and see if we can find another super cat, or at least another Kiwi. So that's it for this segment. So as with the rest of the video that I'm doing here on Oscar and Kiwi's death, I'm going to give you some corrections that need to be made from the first video. This was actually the inspiration for doing this video. I had no idea that Oscar and Kiwi were going to die, within a few days of my video. But, well, actually, as I had mentioned, I did have the idea that they would die together once they were there. But anyway, I want to give some corrections from the first Ask Dan Schneider 100 video in this follow-up. So the first correction is around at the 3-minute mark. I said that I had a cat named Darren, and that we'd gotten him in '83. Actually, it was 1985. So that's correction number one. Correction number two is around the 4-minute mark. The cat Buster, who was another old cat like Darren that we had to put down within a week or so of getting because he had feline leukemia, or FIV, one or the other, was Buster, and we got him in 1993. That's correction two. At about the 4.5-minute mark, correction number three is that Shadow, our cat that we got in '01 with Chia, was born in 1999. I think I misspoke. Then at about the 5:08 mark, the fourth correction is well, I wanted to mention actually that we had Mango Moss as a cat that we babysat for 2-3 summers in the late '90s, early '00s, and Jessica wanted to give the name, a fruit cat name, to one of our cats, so that's how Kiwi got her name. Kiwi owes her name directly to Mango Moss. At about the 6:46 mark, I said that Sassy died in '06. Well, yeah, and then we got Thor and Apollo. Actually, it was a year later. Sassy died, in November of '06, right between a job I had on a phone, at a phone company working the phones, and then when I got a grocery job, the job that screwed me over and fired me a few years ago, that I've mentioned in a few other videos. Thor and Apollo we got on the 7th of December, Pearl Harbor Day in '07. And we did not get them from Dr. Marvin Urbanzik. We got Zeus from Dr. Urbanzik, so I misspoke there. So that's another correction. Sixth correction, around the 8:20 mark, I talked about this fellow who was a fan of my website, who had written a 4-line poem about Apollo after he had died, the bub, and I called it a quartet. It's not a quartet, it's actually a quatrain. The interesting thing is, this fellow who died, I think, of a heart attack or a stroke, while he was working on the poem, apparently, according to his cousins or relatives that contacted me and let me know, he later became the lead character in a book called Trinket Master, which was the first of my wife's Indian books, and he appears in the other 2 Indian books too. And that all springs from this guy who was on my E-list, and that all springs from the death of Apollo and the fact that this fellow, his name was Gumal, uh, Gumal Azawala, I think was his last name, and Jess calls him Gumal Kerawala in her Indian books. But because of Apollo's death and Gumal's writing the poem, that became the inspiration to three great novels by Jessica. Correction number 7. At the 10:40 mark, Oscar, I talked about names, but I forgot to mention that he did clock blocking, not cock blocking, but clock blocking, where he would move around my LED clocks on my night table and try to hide the red light from me. Another name we called him was Mammal. That's what Jessica called him, the Mammal. Uh, Part mammoth, part mammal, part mammal. So she called him the Mammal because he was so big. 20 plus pounds. Um, and I mentioned that Kitty had been called Boo Boo and Booey, or maybe I didn't, but I called her Boo Boo. I go, Boo Boo, come here, little Boo Boo. She was even smaller than Kiwi, and sometimes Booey. Uh, Kiwi we called the Beast because she was uh, so gentle and whatnot. There's a photo that I'll use in this video somewhere. This is the first thing I'm actually recording, where you see Kiwi on the bed and her mouth open as if she's like ferocious, but she was actually just yawning when Jess took the photo. We also would call her the teeny weeny beast. Um, Zeus we called the Bounder because we said he was a hellion. He was bound for hell, and we call him the Bounder. Um, uh, the 8th correction was regarding some of the photos that I did of our cats, and I listed them. The first photo I had said that it was like, well, that was taken in Minnesota. The second photo in the dining room, I said it was taken from 2011 to 2012, and Jess says, no, that was 2008. The third photo was of Oscar and Kiwi. The fourth, Oscar was in his hangout, and the fifth was Oscar's author cover photo. I blew it. I said the cover author photo or something like that, and so Oscar author cover photo. The ninth correction is that Oscar's real death versus the book death was quite different, and I'll talk about Oscar and Kiwi's death together elsewhere in this video. And the 10th thing was I did actually link the Robinson Jeffers poem to the first one, A House Dog's Grave. So anyway, that's about it. This is about some of the nicknames. I mentioned some of the nicknames I gave my cats in other parts of this video, and I'm going to, and also in the first video. So just want to give you a little history of them just so you can see how Jessica's and my minds work. My cat Freddie that I had from 76 to 90, we used to call him, he was called Freddie by the woman that we got him from. And the reason was she called him Fearless Fred, named after Fearless Fosdick, a character from the old Dick Tracy comic strip. And the legend was that she called him Fearless Fred. This is her legend, because as a kitten, he was cornered by a German Shepherd and fought the German Shepherd off by swatting at him. So he was called Fearless Fred. I just sometimes call him Freddy, and as I said, Goings, and my fat boy, and things like that. Susie Q, I think I might have mentioned, but I might not have. She was the first cat that we had. My mom and dad had a cat named Sammy in the 1950s, but I know very little about Sammy, so he's an honorary Schneider cat too, even though I never met him, much less Jess. Susie Q was a mischief maker, and she, in our New York City home, in the cellar basement where there was a drop ceiling with some cardboard, she got in there and got so dirty, and I had to get her out. I had to punch holes in the ceiling. She was such a little mischief maker, but I loved that cat too. She was my first cat, and she died on the kitchen floor in New York City. And I remember my dad wrapping her up in a plastic bag rather. Thor, we call him the Little Prince. We call him Bebe Thor, but because Oscar was called King Oscar, we called Bebe the Little Prince, and Oscar sometimes would be the big bully, and we call Thor the little bully. And all the cats, Jessica would used to link them together. Like Kiwi was half Siamese, and so is Thor. Kiwi and Oscar were the original kittens. Thor and Bub Apollo were kittens 2.0, and Oscar and my new cat Zeus, they called Ounds because Oscar was a mound, and we'd call Zeus, who was bound, he was a hellion bound for hell. Shadow and Thor were linked because they were the furry choir. They were long-haired cats who would always sing. Um, Chia and Shadow were gotten together. They were linked briefly, and so on, especially with Jessica here. But Thor, we call the Little Prince, and just a few minutes ago, he came to the door while I'm recording this, as Zeus is sleeping on the bed, and he looked in. I wanted to let him in, but he's now a little bit scared of me because I've been giving him this pill for this condition called hemobard. Both Oscar and Kiwi had it. It's a germ or a virus or a bacteria that's in the blood. But I've had to force feed him some pills, and so now every time he sees, he thinks he's getting pills. So he went away, but he'll get over it in a few weeks after it's done. I've only got like 3 pills left. I mentioned Apollo being called Bub, named that by Jess, but we also called him the Apollo Wallaby, uh, and then just Wallaby and Wallaby Jones, like Barnaby Jones, the old TV character, and uh, he was uh, he was the cat that had only one eye, and then the second eye was probably going to be lost too, because of here in Texas, a lot of cats get this upper respiratory thing that cats in Minnesota and New York don't get. Chia, who I call Chaiwei, also called her little girl. He was my little girl. I go little, 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 4 times. Little, 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 little. Oh, little, 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 little. Yeah, 4 times usually. Sometimes I hit the fifth one. Um, and I talked about her slanted eyes, Chaiwei, uh, on the highway, the Chaiwei. But because Chia was the little girl, Kiwi, we call teeny weeny, itsy bitsy teeny weeny little black and white weeny. We call her the teeny girl. Zeus, as I said, we call him the Hellion, and then we call him Zooster, and then that became Zooster the Rooster. So we sometimes call him Rooster, and then the Rowdy Boy. And lately, because he's now 20, 21 pounds, he's about the size Oscar was, we call him the Wall. Uh, Now, Oscar, he got his name because the first night we got him back from the place in Minnesota where we got him for Golden Valley Humane Society, Oscar was, and he was proud of his white coat, but he was a little hellion. He tore up uh, the the cellar bathroom that we had him in the first night to get him adjusted, and he just went wild, and we call him Wild. He said we was wild. We said Wild Oscar, Oscar Wilde. It fit, and he was also I mentioned that we called him the half mammal, half mammoth, and the clock blocker. Also, he would get real puffed up when he'd see other cats outside the window, so we'd call him Puff Caddy, and then P Kitty after the rap star. But yeah, Oscar just ripped up the bathroom there, as if to say, "You're not gonna get me." And so we'd call him also the Oscar-jizer, like the Energizer Bunny, the Oscar-jizer. And then he got chubby and he didn't jize anymore. I said, Oscar, it's been so long since you've jized. I mentioned the little kitten that I found in 1980 that my dad wouldn't let us take in, and he died outside. He would have died probably even if we had brought him in. But I called him Reggie after my favorite baseball player on the New York Yankees back then, Reggie Jackson, who hit the 3 home runs in Game 2 of the 1977 World Series to beat the Dodgers. So that was him. Um, Molly, Darren, Buster all had their names from the societies we got them from. And so did Sassy. But Sassy's name fit, and Sassy I would call Chubby Girl and a few other things I've now forgotten. But the names of the cats were often gotten from the shelters. Freddie's was given to him. Kitty was just, my dad called her Kitty, and he felt sorry for her. That's how we got her. Susie Q, I think I named. Um, but a couple of the cats had name changes. Oscar, for example, his original name was Figaro. So when you read a kid's book, if you ever read a kid's book, you'll see there's, I think, a hawk or an eagle that I call Figaro. Figaro the hawk or Figaro the eagle. But that was his name. Figaro didn't fit Oscar. Oscar was a return gift. Apparently a little girl had gotten the kitten, and her mother wouldn't let her keep her or something. So thank God that happened. Oh, Oscar's so enriched. Jessica's in my life. But he wasn't a Figaro. And Thor got his name because Apollo had his name, actually. Apollo also had his name from the shelter. We liked the name, that it was a god. Ooh, and he was orange like the sun, fiery. And so Apollo we liked. And because Apollo had that name, uh, Thor, who was called Fridays, or Friday, because that's the day he was intaked in, who was 4 days older than Apollo. He was born on 8/26/07, Apollo on 8/30/07, and I think Zeus was born like maybe 8/31/12 or something like that. But anyway, because Apollo had the god's name, we gave blue-eyed, Scandinavian-looking Thor, who looked like a little lynx. We called him Thor. And then when Apollo died and we got Zeus, I said, well, I like the gods' names, and so we had Apollo, Thor, and Zeus. And so Zeus and Thor both had their names because Apollo was given a name by someone we have no idea of. One of the things that I decided to do after Oscar and Kiwi's death is that I'm going to release my 2012 book, a kid's book, on Amazon, both the printed version and the Kindle version. And I told Dr. Yu and his staff that I wanted to send them the PDF of the children's version, at least, of the kids' book, because I'd seen this little girl who was 9 or 10 who had this gerbil who came in the day before Oscar had to be put down. I think it was Monday, and she seemed so sad. And I want these kids to have something that could help them read to on how to deal with death. And a kid's book is great at doing that. And apparently the little girl's gerbil was okay, so I'm glad for that. But I still think it's a good thing. So I'm going to give the PDF and have them give it out, and then I'm going to print up like 10 or 12 free copies for me of a kid's book and give them to Dr. Yu's office to give out, so that the parents can maybe learn about death and whatnot. So in this video portion of it, which I'm recording just the audio, you'll be able to see Oscar's author cover photo, which I will use as the main photo for a kid's book. And on the back cover, I'll have my little photo of Kiwi, and that's what you're seeing now. Well, another thing that I'm going to do other than releasing the kids' book is it's changed my idea of what I'm going to do writing-wise. Currently here, as I'm recording on, what is it, the 14th, let's see, no, the 13th of December 2019. As I'm recording this, I'm working on my Gorgeous George novel, Noir Kid, and I'm over 70,000 words into that. I'm 50,000 words into my second musical on the Danny Wagner and Megan Fitzgerald / Morrow characters. And then I was going to go by mid-January when I finish both of them, or late January. I'm going to start my King Arthur plays. But before I start those King Arthur plays and maybe some others, I decided I'm going to do a play about Oscar and Kiwi's deaths. Because it's challenging, because I'm not going to have humans as cats. The cats will probably be invisible characters. It'll be on my interactions with Dr. Yu and his office, and Jess and I over the years, with Apollo, who was the spur for a kid's book. I actually had an idea to do a cat book before Apollo died, but then when Apollo died, that was it. I had to do it. And so I'm going to do a play, and I've got the title. It's going to be called A World Without, meaning a world without Oscar and Kiwi, but also the world outside the self. I want to get beyond the death and suffering. And who you're seeing here is my cat Zeus, who wasn't even born then. But because he missed out on being in the kid's book, I want to just give a little photo of him. I don't have a photo of Oscar. Rather, I do have Oscar, of my earliest cat, Susie Q. I don't believe I have a photo anywhere of her. Freddie, I might have one photo or so somewhere. And Kitty, I think there's a couple of photos in actual physical albums. But this is Zeus when he was a kitten 7 years ago, not long after we got him. And as I record this, he's lying here on the bed with me. And I'm on this bed doing this because I can't record on my laptop, because as part of, I mentioned, being such a bad day, my laptop, my desktop went down, and so I'm recording this on one of my laptops. So here's Zeus, and World Without is a play that's coming. Now I've reached the portion of the video where I'm going to be just throwing out some random stuff that I just want recorded for posterity, basically for my own remembrance. And anyway, so I'm just going to go down this list that I have here on this sheet. So this was a bad day, the 10th of December. I had a typically rotten day at work, overworked, and the two cats died, and then my desktop PC went down. It was a cold and wet day, awful rainy, and then the next day, though, sunny, 70 degrees here in central Texas. I mentioned earlier Kiwi being a real angel. Uh, on December 10th, a Tuesday, 11:47 a.m. when Oscar was put down, Kiwi at 11:50, how she crawled over to him as like a guardian angel, and it was just so touching. And um, uh, then also the last few weeks of both of their lives when they were having trouble walking or looking arthritic. Um, Oscar and Kiwi got, I put up one of my boxes with old books in it there so they could hop on that and then onto the bed. Um, Oscar had his inner eyelid. You could see he was sort of out of it, and the way was half closed even though his eyes was open. Um, I mentioned how we called him the Oscar Geyser. I mentioned how on Star Trek II, Kirk calls Spock the most human of us all, or something like that, while Oscar was the most human cat. Kiwi as the guardian angel. Um, uh, it and there's a thing about death. People think that people who survive the death or are the survivors, that they only miss the dead because of personal selfish reasons, but that's not true. For me, it's missing the person or the being because they're not going to be able to experience things in the future. I mean, all of us are going to die. I'll die. My other cats will die. Jessica will die. You watching these videos will die. Even if you're watching them, 100 or more years from now, you're going to die. Even if you could upload yourself like that idiot Ray Kurzweil thinks, that's not you. Um, but the loss of the future experiences with or without you, that's the thing that gets to me. An Oscar anecdote. Uh, my cat Sassy had these enlarged nipples. She actually had kittens when right before we adopted her in 1990, and Oscar got large nipples too. He was the alpha male, and they especially got that way. Oscar had been shaved when he had been neutered, and he had this tattoo on his belly that you could see what the male symbol, the circle and the arrow, and he got snipped. And anyway, um, Jessica once asked Dr. Yu why the hair where Oscar had been shaved for that operation never grew back, and Dr. Yu says he's always licking himself there. Has something, Dr. Yu said to Jess, has something traumatic come into his life recently? And Jessica said, oh yeah, that was Thor. Because Thor loved Kiwi, and he was always following her, trying to play with her. They would run around. Kiwi was the only one fast enough to keep up with Thor, is our most athletic cat, and probably the most athletic cat I've had. Maybe Shadow in his prime equaled him too. But he loved Kiwi as like a girlfriend, but he idolized Oscar. Big bully Oscar, little bully Thor. He just always tried to. If Oscar was on the bed, he'd sleep right behind Oscar. He and when he was a kitten, I could see Oscar look and go, like this kid. He's always following me around. So anyway, and it's interesting because now Thor, I've had to give him this pill for this hemobard. I may have mentioned this earlier in the video, but now he's sort of scared of me. He wouldn't come in. But other interesting features. My cat Apollo, Bub, he was blind, but he could be across the side of the house. But if I crumpled like my post-its when I'm doing my notes or crumpled a sheet of paper like this, he'd come running in. He loved to bop around the paper, even though he could barely see it. And when Jessica would give him his medicine, he would moan. He'd go, and Jessica would make comments on that. Uh, and it's interesting. In my mind, I wanted to take a photo of the last moments of Kiwi and Oscar on that table at Dr. U's, but Jessica didn't want me to do it. See, she doesn't want reminders of those last moments, but I do. When I saw my dad dying from cancer, I would have wanted photos of that to see him that way. I was so offended when I saw him in the casket and he had been put wax makeup on him to make him look presentable, even though he had done it. To me, that's still important. Jessica wants to deny those things. I want to embrace the whole of these people that I know, the good, the bad, and or animals too, the good, the bad, and everything. So that's just another difference between Jess and I. As I said, he just looked in the room, saw, and that's interesting. I mentioned how Chia had died by running away, and I won't go into the details with Jessica stuff, but the first night that Chia was gone, I remember Shadow. We just had Shadow, Chia, and Sassy at the time. Sassy didn't care. She always slept on the couch, but Thor and Chia would sleep on the bed with us in Minnesota. And I remember he came down the hall to the bedroom, and he'd be going, meow, 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 Shadow, the way he would, my sweet boy. It's like he was looking all around for Chia, and we never found Chia. May 17th of '02, I think, was when Chia ran away. And I always hoped that some old lady would find her and take her in at least, even if she wasn't brought to a vet because she had been shipped. But we never heard from her again. Similarly, Thor, the night of December 10th, while I was waiting, I was off on Wednesday morning, actually. I was sitting here, and I saw peek into my den, which is across the hall, and then peek in here by the door, even though he's been upset about me giving him these pills. And I could swear he was looking for Chia or Oscar too. Oscar had been gone for 4 days by that time already, but uh, Kitty was still here. Kiwi, not Kitty, Chia, Kiwi. I'm constantly mixing up the names of my pets. Jessica gets on me, but Thor was doing just what Shadow did. And I mentioned the Star Trek 2, The Most Human Cat. Um, Jessica has always commented too on how I had different voices for my when I addressed my cats. If I saw Oscar, I go, Oscar, guy. When I saw Kiwi, I go, oh, Kiwi, there's my girl, there's my girl. When I see Thor, I'd be, Baby Thor, what are you up to, Baby Thor? And with Zeus, I'd be, you round mound, and be, you hellion. So I'd have these slightly different voices I'd use, um, and the last few nights and days, I've had things like, oh, got to give them medicines. Or, oh, in bed, I said, I don't want to crush Kiwi because Oscar would sleep here on my left shoulder, and Kiwi would be down on my right hip underneath the covers. And now I don't have to worry about crushing them or anything. And uh, I knew I'd miss that, and I knew that I'd miss Oscar's clock blocking when he started doing that a year and a half, 2.5 years ago, whenever it was. I'd be like, he would knock the stuff over and make noise, and he'd come in the last 3 or 4 months when he'd be here, he'd be like, rah, 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 right in my ear, as if to say, I'm here, and I wonder if at some point he knew he was dying, even back then, and just wanted to say, spend more time with me. And I mentioned there are kittens there that are 3 weeks old that maybe we'll get some. Maybe I'll do another addendum there, but I'll mention them in future ones. And how I knew I missed the clock blocking, and let's see. And so that's about it. I'm gonna close this video just as I started with the photos of Oscar and Kiwi, and that's about it for now. In the future, when I watch this, Dan, remember this time. Um, I want to remember that I want people to know that a human's love for their pet, a cat, dog, any other kind of pet especially, and the way we treat animals has to improve. Human beings are going to have to mostly get over eating meat eating. We'll have to have the meat that's cultured, that was never alive in an animal. That'll eventually replace things. Meat and dairy are going to be going away, especially with global warming and the stuff we're going to have to battle and all the economic turmoil that's coming. So anyway, Oscar and Kiwi, I love you. Up in kitty heaven, King of Cats, Oscar, Guardian Angel, Kiwi, and Thor, and Zeus, and all the other cats that I've mentioned in these 2 videos. And my wife, Jessica, I love her most of all. Goodbye for now.